Okay, we're ready when you guys are.
All right. Okay, so we decided to do our presentation on the Electoral College and specifically the 2016 election. So we're looking at this from a secondary level approach. We focus heavily on the math behind kind of calculating different statistics that go into determining things like voting power, voter turnout, and things like that. So I'm Jacob.
Austin. Monty.
All right, so we're going to start out with a poll. 2 questions to begin with. So if you guys haven't already, you can either text in to 22333 with this, or you can go onto your computer, type this in. The poll should be up. So we're going to go to that. All right. So the first question is, did you vote this year? A is yes, B is no. All right, is everybody kind of on here? All right. And the second question is, do you think that we should keep the Electoral College the way that it is, or should we change it in some way? So again, A is yes and B is no. Okay, so it looks like about 86, 87% of you guys think that we should keep it the way that it is.
So this is just a video kind of to explain like the Electoral College, if you're unsure. So.
The Electoral College isn't a college that decides if you get a diploma, but it does decide if you get to be President of the United States. In the United States, citizens over the age of 18 can vote in presidential elections. This is called the popular vote. But it's the Electoral College that actually chooses the president. And you need 270 electoral votes to become president. The Founding Fathers created the Electoral College because they worried states with smaller populations might not get fairly represented. They also didn't think the common man was informed enough to choose a suitable president. So they created the Electoral College. Today it has 538 members. That's one for every member of the House of Representatives and Senate, representing all 50 states. In addition, Washington, D.C. has 3 Electoral College members. To win the presidency, you must win at least 270 electoral votes. And to win electoral votes, for the most part, you need to win the popular vote in each state. By winning California's popular vote, you take home the state's 55 electoral votes. And if you win the popular vote in Texas, you win that state's 38 electoral votes. This is called a winner-take-all system. But sometimes a candidate wins the popular vote nationally, but doesn't amass enough electoral votes. This happened in 2000. Democratic candidate Al Gore won the popular vote nationwide, yet Republican George W. Bush won Florida in a close contest. That was enough to give him the electoral vote victory. Only 4 times in America's history has the popular vote been different from the electoral vote.
That last part, of course, is different because this election, Hillary had more.
How do the results of this presidential election reflect the will of the people?
Okay, you got the handout?
I started passing it out. Did
Oh, okay.
everybody get the handout?
Okay, so if you look at the front page of that handout, I've got the total population from the 2010 census on the left, and you can see it only takes about 8 states to I drew a line at the 50% population market, but 8 states have half the population. And I pointed out that the District of Columbia is on here because they also get 3 votes. We're going to go over some of these categories about this recent election. And I won't have you guess the top 5, but I'll be having you participate and guess, and try to think of a good reason why you picked what you did. So anyways, of course, the Electoral College is based on the 2010 census. Now, the question is, do they base on voting age population or census population? Raise your hand if you think they count everybody, including babies, to determine the Electoral College. Anybody? Okay, actually, if you're out of the womb, you get counted in the census, and you count towards the Electoral College. That was an interesting fact that I didn't know. So, I'll ask you, can anybody think of a state where basically, this is going to show the percent voting age population out of the total population. So if you've got an older population in your state, can anybody guess who might be in that list?
Florida.
Florida, okay, that's a good guess. Yes. So that's the top 5: District of Columbia, North Dakota, Florida, Colorado, Washington. North Dakota's got a lot of workers from out of state. District of Columbia, 94%. Go ahead and hit the next one. The bottom 5, of course, I don't know, the only one that points out to me is Utah. They have a lot of large families. So they're down. So we range, go ahead and hit the national average. Okay. So this is kind of interesting. It doesn't actually affect your voting power per se, but the people in those states get more voting power if they've got more people under 18. Go ahead, switch. Okay, percent eligible voters out of the, can anybody tell me of some reasons why you would be old enough to vote but you wouldn't be eligible to vote?
If you had a felony.
Felony, exactly. Does anybody have another one?
You're not a legal resident?
Okay, good. That's the other thing I learned. Yeah, if you've been convicted of a felony, you're in prison, parole, you're ineligible to vote. But also, if you're an illegal immigrant, you're still counted towards the Electoral College. California actually picked up 6 Electoral College votes in 2010, and because of their large immigrant population in the preceding 10 years. Okay, go ahead and show the top 5. So those states have the highest percent of eligible voters per the population. Can anybody guess the bottom 5? So this would be the ones with high felons or immigrants.
California, Florida.
California, Florida. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, New York, Illinois, Texas, New Jersey, and California. And it's no coincidence that these have the highest immigrant populations. Actually, California, 1 in 7 residents is an illegal immigrant. Go ahead and show the national average. And so it increases the voting power of the people in these states because they get more Electoral College votes if they've got more immigrants. Go ahead and show the next screen. So this is a map of the illegal immigrants in each state. And as you can see, New York, Florida, Texas, California, all of those states had the lowest percentage of eligible voters, have the highest population of there's about 5 or 6 states that have more than 500,000 illegal immigrants. Okay, go ahead and change. Okay, now this chart shows the turnout of the voting eligible population, like what percent voted. Of course, every other year is a presidential year, so the presidential years have been running at about 60%. Does anybody want to guess what the turnout for this year was? Who thinks it was higher than 60%? Raise your hand. Only one? Lower than 60%? Okay, most of you. Okay, it was actually right at about 59% for the people voted. Go ahead and change it. Go ahead and show the top 5. Okay, does anybody see anything in the top 5, why they would have a high voting percentage? Those were the 5 states that had the highest voting percentage. Everybody see a common thread between those states?
They have the most eligible voters?
No, not necessarily, because that would be mostly based on population. These are actually swing states. If you think, and Wisconsin's actually number 6 on the list, you know, some of these are the ones that they're contesting the election results now, but there also were swing states in the last election. So a lot more people turned out to vote. Go ahead and show the next one. Okay, so the bottom 5, you're down to actually 43% of people showed up to vote. And I noticed on our class poll, what was it, about 64% of this class voted. Okay, go ahead and change. Okay, now who thinks that third-party candidates were a factor in this election? What I'm going to show here is the percent of people that voted for either Hillary or Trump versus the total votes counted. Raise your hand if you think third-party wasn't a factor in this election. Okay, I didn't think so. I didn't think so either. There was actually 15 states where the amount of third-party votes were higher than the margin of victory for either Hillary or Trump. So that's fascinating to me. And of course, I don't know if you can see this background very well. This shows I voted. You know, this shows we're barely over 50% of people voted in this election. You know, which goes along with the last slide. But in addition to that, okay, go ahead and show the top 5. So these states, Mississippi, 98% of them voted for either Hillary or Trump, of the people that voted. Okay, can anybody guess who might be in the bottom 5?
New Mexico?
New Mexico, okay. Anybody else? Here's the bottom 5. New Mexico's in there. Utah, 28% of people voted for a third-party candidate in this election. Okay, go ahead and show the national average. So that's a pretty wide range. Move on. So if you look at the percent of the two-party votes out of the total eligible voters, go ahead and show that. Go ahead and click on the bottom 5. So only 1 out of 3 eligible voters in Utah voted for either Hillary or Trump. I mean, it's amazing how low these numbers can get. Go ahead and show the national average. Okay, 56%. Okay, and that was the only part that I had. But Austin's going to lead kind of a debate about changing the electoral college later on. So those are just some interesting facts you can keep in mind. Great.
All right, so I'm going to jump in here. So we're looking at whole numbers here rather than percents. So the total voter eligible population. So if we show the top 5, these are your big states. Not only are they densely populated, but they also have large landmass. So we got California, Texas, Florida, New York, and Pennsylvania. So those are our most populated states in the country. And then if we look at our bottom 5, we still have a couple of big states here in North Dakota, Alaska, and Wyoming, but they're very sparsely populated. So these and then District of Columbia falls in there since they count towards the Electoral College. So these are our lowest populated states, and the total eligible voter population in the United States is almost 227 million voters. So if we look at the total population, that's a significant decrease from that, but that's still a lot of people who are able to vote. And then if we look at this, so again, the darker blue that it is the more densely populated area. So we look at our states that made that list as being the most populated, and there's a lot of dark blue in them over in California there too. So they're big states, they have very densely populated areas. We've got big cities in each of those. And then we look at our states that didn't have very much, or that were the least populated. So we've got Wyoming up there, North Dakota, so you can see there's a lot of yellow and a lot of white in those states. So those are our least populated states. And if we look at the total votes counted in the election, so our top 5 fits pretty well with the states that had the greatest population. You see there's a little bit of flip-flop there, but it's mostly stays consistent. And then same with our bottom 5. So Vermont slides in there. But if we look at it, there's only 134 million votes counted, and there's 227 million people who are able to vote. So now we're going to look at voting power. So the way that we calculated voting power is we took the state with the least number of votes cast and compared that to all the other states. So Wyoming was our bottom state with the least number of votes cast, but can you guys think of states that might also fall into having the highest voting power? So those with the small populations, and so basically their vote is represented best in the Electoral College.
So if Wyoming's on that same list? would
Yeah, so Wyoming's number 1.
So then would like North Dakota also be one because they're sparsely populated?
Yeah, so let's put them up. So North Dakota you'd think would make the list, but they actually have just high enough of a population that they're not as well represented as you would think. So if we look at this though, most of these are 3 Electoral College, they get 3 Electoral College votes, but for every 1 Wyoming vote, we cancel out essentially 1.3 votes in Hawaii, if you compare between states like that. Now, who could think of a state that might be in the bottom 5, so they have the least voter power?
California.
Yeah, that's what I thought going into this too, but California actually only falls 31st on the list. So they have, their balance between their population and the electoral vote is pretty even. So it's actually those states that are close to getting another House seat, but they don't quite meet that minimum population required to get that next one in terms of splitting it up evenly. So those states are the most poorly represented. So Florida being the worst, being at 3.8. So for every 1 vote that we cast here, we essentially cancel out 3.8 votes in Florida. And then our national average is 2.5. So we could hypothetically, everybody in Wyoming can cancel out 2.5 votes anywhere else with the Electoral College system. So now we're going to look at the hypothetical voting power. So the last one was the actual voting power based on this 2016 election. So the hypothetical voting power would be if everyone who's eligible to vote in that state actually votes. So Wyoming again is at the top of the list, and you see there's a little bit of change here, and North Dakota then does slide into that, and that's because North Dakota had lower voter turnout comparatively. So if everyone voted, then they would have, their voting power actually goes, I think it stays about the same, but they make it into that top 5. Then if we look at the bottom 5, we've got quite a bit more of a change here. So we still then, if we look here, we've got Florida, Pennsylvania, and New York. Those were our big states that had the highest populations, but North Carolina, one that you wouldn't expect to be in there, and then Ohio, so a swing state. I guess Pennsylvania, Florida, and Ohio, all 3 swing states, actually have some of the lowest hypothetical voting power in the entire country. But then our national average stays again right at 2.5. Alright, and then, so us living in Wyoming, no matter how you look at it, actual voting power, hypothetical voting power, we have more power than anybody else in the country when it comes to actually casting our vote, because our population is so much lower than everybody else, but we still do have to have those 3 electoral votes. There's a few more states that fall in there, so having the Electoral College really does help us get our say out there, and it helps some of those other small rural states too.
So we wanted to give you like 3 minutes to go on fairvote.org. It kind of it's a website that explains, like, if we were to change the Electoral College, what would we change it to? So go to fairvote.org and do a little research with 3 minutes. What? Oh,
Yeah.
what did you want us to do with the
Just like, because it explains the different, like solutions to changing the electoral college. So like right here, it shows Maine changed their voting to ranked choice, and then the popular vote plan right here. Just kind of like read through the article a little, get an idea what those changes would do. Yeah. Alright, so now that maybe you kind of have a little bit of an idea, we're gonna have like a kind of friendly debate on what you think we should change it to. So, does anybody think we should change it to the ranked choice, or?
I think it sounds like a good idea. It's kind of, for example, we all have to do the phase 3 application, and you have to rank your choice of where you want to be in schools. So that's, you choose your best option, and then you have fallbacks, I guess, if that doesn't work out.
Right, right. Anybody else have any thoughts against it or for it? How about the popular vote? Does anybody think that'd be better? This is like against the electoral college too, so if you find something that you don't like about the electoral college, you can say it.
I think one of the strangest things about the electoral, or one of the arguments for the electoral college is that regions are represented better to elect a president. When I think that's pretty strange, because that's what voting for representatives is for. That's how people express their region's issues in Washington. And I don't think if the people are electing a president, I don't think their region or whatever their interests are in a state or region should matter in the president.
So are you thinking popular vote, or?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's a better argument for the popular vote than the electoral college. I don't think regional things matter. People pick a president, it doesn't matter if it's like coal out here or immigration in the south or whatever. If that's how they decide to vote for a president, then that's fine, but just count the votes equal. Whoever gets the most votes wins.
does anybody have an argument against that?
I think voter fraud would be higher if that were the case. If we had popular vote, I think there'd be more voter fraud.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, then?
I think like Wyoming does have the most represented vote per capita because like we do have the lowest population compared to our electoral college votes. But I think nobody really cares about us as like Wyoming in like the national stage. Like people campaign for California and Illinois and Florida and stuff like that. Nobody really cares, even though we have the most voting represented, like most power with our votes. It doesn't really matter who gets our 3 electoral college votes. So I think that is something that kind of sucks because like you see a lot more of like push and talk about things like for California's 55 votes, where like Wyoming, whoever gets our 3 gets our 3, and that's really cool, but like whatever. So I think it's just one of those things where it kind of divides the country a little bit because there's such a push for some people's votes, but for others they're like, cool, just go wherever.
Well, do you think that the electoral college kind of sways that too? Because like Wyoming's obviously gonna be a Republican state.
Yeah, we're always red.
So do you think if there was a different voting or a different, like an alternative way to elect a president, it'd change things more, you think?
I think kind of what Matt said was right, was that it kind of has a little bit to do with what your region is interested in. Like, Wyoming's always gonna be red because we're a coal state. And so like, we're gonna vote along the lines of who's gonna protect coal because that's most of Wyoming's livelihood.
Right. Ally, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, I think you would have a lot of uneducated voters if you did popular vote. And so, I don't know if everyone's vote. I don't know, I just think you have people that don't really follow politics, but then they go vote because they saw something on Facebook that, like, bad about Trump, so they vote for Hillary,
Right,
or whatever. So,
right. So do you think the ranked choice would be a better option?
Yeah,
Because you have to kind of know a little more.
yes.
Anybody else?
I think it would encourage people to vote. You could understand why a Democrat in Wyoming might not want to vote, to take the time out of their day to do that, especially, like, votes matter in swing states. You know, that would might encourage you to go out and vote. But if you know the outcome of voting in your state, then you could understand somebody not taking the time to go out and vote. I think it might boost voter turnout, because if you're a single vote and it counts in the popular vote, then your vote really does count.
Is anybody defending the Electoral College? Right.
I mean, we've had the electoral college for hundreds of years and it's always worked. I mean, granted, not everybody agrees every time that one candidate loses over another or vice versa, but I think the electoral college has worked for hundreds of years. And I mean, yeah, us as Wyoming don't always, I mean, we cancel out votes and we don't always have the most amount of votes, but I mean, if everybody does their part, I think it works out to be all right as seen. I mean, so.
I was just gonna say, but arguably say that we're a Republican state, so the last two times the popular vote and the electoral vote haven't like matched up. The Republicans have come on top, so as a Republican, you probably would say, I mean, I tell it goes on the flip side of the Democrat.
Right. Well, yeah, it is. It does seem like whoever loses, they're sore losers. They want to change it, even if they won the previous election.
I think the Electoral College, when it was created, was useful, but our population has grown exponentially since then. So you're having more people, and granted, some of them are underage, like we just said with the census. They count towards the Electoral College, but they can't actually vote. So you're giving power to people who can't use it, but then their state gets more power for the election. Does that make sense? So I think that it's just kind of null and void at this point.
Right. Yeah, things have definitely changed a little since, because our first president was elected with the Electoral College, so, I mean, that's almost 230 years, so.
Alright, so we're gonna go back one more time now that we've given you guys all this information. So do you think that we should keep the Electoral College the way that it is, or should we make some sort of change to it? Alright, so it looks like about 64% here at this point think that we should keep it the way that it is, and it started, no, 60%, it started at 87%. So it looks like we changed a few of your guys' minds on that. And then these are our references that we use. So if anybody wants to find out more, you can ask us questions about like where we got our numbers, stuff like that. But that pretty much wraps up our presentation. Just in the nick of time.
All right, while they're finishing up and get our next team set up, any feedback for this group?
I think you guys did a good job on it.